Welcome into the Your Illini Nation pregame show. Bret Beherns and Jeremy Werner here from Illini Inquirer, the final one of the football season. Maybe. We'll see if we get a bowl game. Illinois fighting for bowl eligibility today, taking on a Northwestern team that's been the surprise of the Big Ten, I would say as a whole, Jeremy. Predicted to win 2.5 games. They already have a bowl bid locked up. It is a beautiful day here for football at Memorial Stadium. I was a little worried it's going to be cold. The sun is out, though. There's no wind. I think that's the biggest thing, Jeremy. So if you're heading out to the game here, I think it's pretty pleasant right now.
Yeah, especially if you are in, see if I get my directions right, the east side. That sun is going to be on you through most of the game. That sun makes it a lot better. As you said, no wind. We've gotten really lucky with weather so far this season. It's a gorgeous day for football and a big day for Illinois football.
Take out the Maryland game. I think it was you and Andy there that had some rain. We've had really a perfect season for weather here. Like, there's been no torrential downpours. Not really been that cold. Like, I think last year there's some wind. We had one game, was that a couple games ago here, I want to say. But it wasn't anything like last year. We had Michigan State. Purdue was freezing last year. I feel pretty fortunate.
No, yeah.
Fans should as well.
This worked out really well. Of course, today, attendance will be down. It's Thanksgiving weekend, so all the students are basically back home, and it's a colder day. Maybe people don't want to get out here. But it is a beautiful day for football, Brett. And talking around people around the program, they think this is huge for the program. Obviously, you got a bowl bid on the line. You got a Land of Lincoln Trophy, trying to win that for a third straight year for the first time since 1990. There's a lot on the line for this program right now.
It's meaningful football in November. If we would have been standing here when we started this pregame show, 5 years ago now? And you would have said, all right, hey, Illinois is going to be playing meaningful November football. I think it probably would have felt pretty good about that. That perspective is key. Yet at the same point, Jeremy, this is huge because you want to get back-to-back bowls for the first time since 2010, 2011. Yeah. For Bret Bielema to not make a bowl after an 8-4 season last year, 8-5, where you felt terrible how November ended. For me, this is gigantic as they hit the recruiting trail here and try and just continue to sell momentum and moving forward.
And I asked that because on the field, is there that big of a difference between 5-7 and 6-6? Not really. With the way you play, it's a player here, there. Not to go all Tim Beckman on everybody. But I asked somebody on staff, I go, how big is this for recruiting? And they said it's big. And the reason is they can sell they're doing things they haven't done in this program in a long time. So while there have been some injuries, they had a 2-4 start, they say, listen, we overcame those things, won 4 of our last 6 games, got to a bowl game, back-to-back bowl games for the first time since 2011 for this program. We are still on the upswing. If you go 5-7, don't make a bowl, and you finish 3-6 in the Big Ten, you kind of got to explain it, right? You got to sit there and go, well, we had injuries here, this thing happened. But if we would have said before the season that you go 5-7 and miss a bowl game, that's a huge disappointment. You go 6-6, it still feels a little underwhelming given all the opportunities you had in the Big Ten West. And it makes me go, what happened in the second half against Purdue? What happened in that game against Nebraska? But this team has played better football the back half of the season. But if you end it with a win over Northwestern, with a win to get into a bowl game, Brett, you feel like, okay, they've reestablished that this is a program that can get to bowl games more years than not.
Yeah, from the outside looking in, I just feel like most people, if they haven't followed this program all season, some national people, Illinois is back in a bowl game. Like, okay, that's not too bad. Where we look at it in the day-to-day and following and go, well, how come you couldn't score more than 7 points against the Nebraska team that it didn't end up being very good? How come you lost by 25 to Purdue? There's still outliers there, but there's far more qualifiers you have to have if they don't make a bowl game in 5-7. And for me, Jeremy, high school recruiting is one thing in that. It's all about the transfer portal for me in selling that, hey, look, we made another bowl game, and look, we're going to do that again if you come in here, because we both know they're going to have to hit the portal very hard this offseason.
Yeah, and I think you can still sell, hey, we have Johnny Newton, we have Keith Randolph, Isaiah Adams, NFL draft picks. I think they care more about that and NIL than a lot of these bowl games. But I do think if you're just trying to sell high school kids, the next Malik Elzy, the next Sabor Kareem, like, you want to get those guys. You got to show that you're a program that not only produces NFL talent, but also can win games consistently. Because I think of this. You're thinking about the Big Ten pecking order. It's going to get harder and harder with the 4 Pac-12 teams coming in here. But right now, you kind of think the last 2 years, Illinois is in that realm with Minnesota, Wisconsin, right? You want to be in there. You don't want to be in the Indiana tier. You don't want to be, Rutgers makes a bowl game this year, but you don't want to be at that bottom tier of the Big Ten. You want to kind of be in that middle, and that's where Illinois is trying to get up the ladder. I think getting to another straight bowl game and maybe building on that with another one next year, it kind of puts you in that place where you're a respectable program that other fan bases in the Big Ten got to worry, hey, we got Illinois. That's not going to be an easy win.
Yeah. And there's been moments. I think when we look, at least I do, Jeremy, and we talked at the beginning of the season, this team should be a bowl team. For all the talent on there, this team on paper should be a bowl team.
Yep.
Now, they've underwhelmed at times. I think they've maybe performed at some positions, okay, adequate to maybe what we thought they would be. But overall, like, if you only finish with 5 wins, man, like,
it's underachieving.
It is. Yeah. And I think Bret would say that, at least, I don't know about publicly. If they don't win today, we'll see what he says after the game. I'm very interested in how he'll try and spin that, right?
I didn't come here to win 5 games.
Correct. I think we'll hear that, right? Like, put that on your bingo board if they do not win today, that we'll hear Bret say, I didn't come here to win 5 games. But, like, he's honest in that and the truth, but he's also going to have to try and spin that somehow positive on the recruiting trail going forward. And it's about those 15 practices, and yes. I think that's part of it. The health has been a huge part of this season. Losing 4 scholarship running backs is huge. And we should say on the men today, Aiden Lawfrey, questionable. How much do you buy that he can play today after knee surgery, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah.
And what do you think his impact actually could be?
It sounds like it was a scope, and a lot of times you can come back within a month for a scope, maybe 4 to 6 weeks. So it sounds like it's a little quick. I don't know if they're going to put him out there. I mean, Aiden Lawfrey, I've always liked his potential, but he has not shown a lot when he's gotten on the field outside that Florida Atlantic game. Then he gets hurt and has missed the last couple of weeks. I still think Fidanzo would be above him. He got a carry last week. He's healthy. Do you want to put Aiden Lawfrey in that situation? I think you're going to see a lot of Reggie Love today. But the fact that Aiden Lawfrey could be back, if you get to a bowl game, he's going to be healthy for that. He can be healthy for bowl practices. And most importantly, maybe for spring ball, to get some healthy running backs in there. But that is a huge concern right now because I thought you missed Caden Fagan at Iowa.
No
Reggie Love did a really nice job, had 70 snaps in that game, something like that. But not having Caden Fagan on 3rd and 1, 4th and 1, I think those are missed opportunities for this Illinois team where you just give it to Fagan. You're probably going to get it, even if the blocking's not great. Barry Lundy's got to execute a lot better in those short yardage situations without having that kind of ramrod there.
And I think back on this, Jeremy. Remember when Reggie Love sat out the Purdue game? That was probably a little early to come back. But a couple of weeks after that, he was still out. Mm-hmm. And Bret had said, too, I believe it was at Minnesota, he didn't go. Is that correct? Or was it the game before that? I think it was Minnesota where Bret said he didn't board the team plane. He wasn't on the travel roster. If, let's say, he would have played and gotten hurt, got nicked up, maybe he's not as fresh. Like, is Illinois then rolling out Nick Fidanzo today as the only, running back? Those things are part of a season, right? But, to me, when I think about that and how far down the depth chart it is, and if Reggie were to get nicked up again today, you said that carry load he had last week, that play count, to me, that's really important that he was able to sustain that. And they're going to need him today in that running back room, which is just insane when you think about how many injuries they've had this season.
And I think a more important part is I think Reggie Love's really good. He's just a reliable running back, does everything well. I think he's the best blocker by far among all the running backs. But when he gets good blocking, he takes advantage of it. He's got great vision. He's got bursts more so than Caden Fagan. But he needs good blocking in front of him. Caden Fagan can kind of plow through bad blocking and get a positive gain. Reggie Love isn't that kind of player. But I think Illinois has a huge advantage in the trenches today. Northwestern's offensive line is, I think, the worst in the Big Ten by yards per carry and by sacks allowed. You got Johnny Newton, Seth Coleman. Those guys playing really well up front. Keith Randolph potentially playing in his final game in an Illinois uniform. That's a huge advantage. But I also think Northwestern's defensive front, Aiden Hubbard's been a solid player for them, but they do not have the NFL talent that they have had the previous couple of years. So I think Isaiah Adams, Julian Pearl, they're potentially final games. The offensive line, which has played a lot better the last 5 games, they need to impose their will and set up Reggie Love and John Paddock for success.
We'll see how much Aiden actually gets carries today. Look, if I set the number over-under on carries, I would say 3.5. Snaps played might be a little bit more than that. I think, and this is just me speculating, I think it was more of a decoy for Bret. Now, that doesn't mean he's not going to dress today. I think he will be out there. Yeah. I think he'll, maybe get on the field 10.5 plays, 12 plays, something like that. And maybe that is all they need if Reggie can continue to do that. But, Bret's got some gamesmanship in there too. Who his quarterback is going to be. We saw that play out very well. And it's going to be John Paddock today. At least we think, like he said he's going to start. Look, I think John will have a quicker trigger, though. This is not the Iowa defense that he faced last week, but I didn't think he hadn't necessarily played average at best, I would say, against a very good Iowa defense. That's the qualifier. I do think today, though, if he does not play up to what we've seen his capability be, that doesn't mean he's going to throw 500 yards. But if he doesn't like put themselves in position, I think Luke's coming in because this is it. They got to make a bowl.
No, I agree with you. I think John Paddock didn't play his best football last week. Iowa's defense has a lot to do with it.
Of course.
They were much more difficult than Indiana, but I thought he didn't make the plays Illinois needed to win the football game. On that last 3rd and 4th down, he didn't go through his progressions. He kind of locked onto his receiver. I do think Barry Lundy could have moved the pocket a little bit more for him, and that's an adjustment Illinois is going to have to make. It's a shorter quarterback. John Paddock gets rid of the ball really quickly, but teams scout that. So now they're more focused on just getting their hands in passing lanes rather than full out rushing the passer. So Illinois needs to make some adjustments on that end, whether it's a double move going deep. But I do think he's going to have more opportunities against a Northwestern defense that has some solid players, but is not quite Iowa. So, but I agree with you, Brett. If John Paddock struggles, if Illinois gets down a couple of scores in this game, I think the leash has to be a lot quicker. The short leash today, I would imagine on John Paddock is Luke Altmaier. We know he can make plays. I think he would have opportunities. And they missed Luke Altmaier's legs last week at times. John Paddock gets rid of the football more. I think he avoided the big mistakes. He got lucky on a few of those. But they need John Paddock to play better because I didn't think he played all that well against Iowa.
And for me, it's his legs, Jeremy. I think you can add another element in that he can come in and maybe he comes in. Do they play 2? I don't know. Do they get some Altmaier reps? Look, everything's on the table for me at this point, and I think John will start. Like I'm very confident in that. It's senior day.
Can I pull the Dan Fouts?
Yeah.
Last game of the year, you can't hold anything back.
Right? Like what does it matter at this point, right? And I think both John and Luke are both into the same understanding. At least this is my outside perspective. Just win the game. Like it doesn't matter who plays as long as they win the game, and then you figure it out later on. I think Luke knows he's the future here, and I don't think there's any kind of like transfer worry or anything at that point. Like Luke is the future, right? And I think he understands that and knows that. But at this point, you got to win the game, and they're favored. Like we'll see how they come out and handle that today with everything on the line because Northwestern already has its bowl bid locked up. I think it's just fascinating too in the mental makeup of this game as you go into it as a player. Like you've got to win. Is there pressure to know that Illinois has to win today where Northwestern is just playing to get to 7?
Well, to be honest with you, Brett, I'm kind of nervous about this game being in Memorial Stadium for Illinois. There's not going to be as many fans. The students are on break. It's a colder day, so maybe fans don't come out for this one. But this. There's a tightness in the Illinois fan base. There's a tightness that when something goes wrong, it's just going to fall apart. And I understand it from the fan base. But I do feel like that's transitioned to the team. I think we saw it against Indiana. I think we saw it a little bit against Toledo and Nebraska, that when they struggle in here, it's hard to get out of it because you can feel that crowd tense up, and I think it makes this team tense up. They got to get rid of that. They can't worry about that. So if they make an early mistake, can they bounce back from it? I think it's part of the reason why Illinois has had more success on the road under Bret Beherns. It's because they get away from it. They don't feel that pressure. It's kind of like we got nothing to lose out here. I think Northwestern comes out with that, trying to get to a better bowl game than the Quick Lane Bowl, which is probably where they're slated to go right now. But for Illinois, motivation should not be an issue. A lot of these guys could be their last game in an Illinois uniform, and you want to set the program up for success for the long term. And a lot of these guys want to play another game, right? They're competitors, and to win that Landon Lincoln Trophy for a 3rd straight year, kind of establish yourself again as, yes, we should be the big brother in this matchup. I think that all the motivation should be on Illinois' side, but I think the pressure is all on Illinois' side as well.
In my eyes, you know how you get rid of that pressure? You come out and you play well early. Like if you don't get down in this game, I think it completely changes the mindset. If they can get even an early 3-point lead, 7-point lead at the end of the first quarter, I just think that flips something inside of these Illinois players where there's not going to be 50,000 people here, right? This is not going to be the Indiana game. Well, I thought there was a pretty good crowd there, all things considered, and they saw a heck of a shootout. We'll see how that goes today. All right, you say some of these guys playing their last game here at Memorial Stadium. We know Johnny Newton, shocker, he's not playing in the bowl game. This is his final game in an Illinois uniform. Keith Randolph says that he might play in a bowl game. We'll see. I don't know how that kind of lines up, but he's declaring for the NFL draft as well. Both of those guys with eligibility left, but there's several guys. This could be their final game here. 25 seniors, I think, is what Bret had told us on Wednesday. It was that they're planning to walk. Some of those guys with the COVID year could come back again.
A lot of guys have eligibility left.
So we could see how that plays out. Isaiah Williams, though, in my mind, the guy that's circled where you're like, okay, if this is his last game, a heck of a career for him. But, like, still a whole lot he could do here if he does decide to come back.
Well, if you're the Icon Collective, I think number one is number one on your off-season list. You can talk about getting all these transfers and using your NIL dollars. I think Illinois has been smart with the NIL dollars they have to try and retain their players. Keeping Johnny Newton was better than any transfer they could get. Yep. Keeping Keith Randolph was better than any transfer they could get. I think Isaiah Williams, if you're able to retain him, a guy who's not a guaranteed draft pick, come back, make a lot of money in college for the next year, rewrite the record books at wide receiver, which what a heck of a story that would be for him as a former quarterback. I think there's a lot to gain for him coming back, but maybe he just wants to make that leap. But Seth Coleman's another one. I don't know. I think Seth, with the way he's played at the end of the year, has probably set him up to potentially be drafted. So does he want another 6 year in college? He's got to figure it out. Icon's got to give him a nice offer to come back. But Tip Ryman, Reggie Love's got another year. I think he would be back. I think Tip Ryman would be back. But guys like Caleb Griffin, Casey Washington, this is their last game at Memorial Stadium. So guys that have given a lot to the program, guys who have been leaders, you want to send them out on top. And for Illini fans, I would enjoy number 4. This is your last chance to see him in an Illini uniform. He's one of the best players in this program's history. He's probably going to be a top 20 pick. Some are now projecting him as a top 10 pick. We'll see on that. But you're going to have back-to-back years where you likely have a top 20 pick. And he's the best defensive lineman I have covered at Illinois. And Corey Legit was a really good player. Akeem Spence, really good player. Whitney Merciless, great player. Johnny Newton has been the most disruptive interior defensive lineman I've seen.
Yeah, and I think it's all feasible here. We could have back-to-back consensus first-team All-Americans.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Two
for
guys
all
with plaques
of those.
on their walls.
Right,
in
like,
Grange
think about that with Devin Witherspoon last year and then Johnny Newton this year. I didn't look it up. We should look that up. I don't know if you know offhand. Like the last time Illinois had consensus first-team All-Americans.
It would probably be Hardy and
years.
Rice in the same year.
Yeah,
right?
so was that
Howard,
94, 95?
Yeah,
like,
early 90s.
95, 96, something like that, man. Like that is crazy to think about how good just two individual players on defense have been.
And it's why you'd like to make back-to-back bowl games with those guys, right? You don't want to go into that thinking, oh, they only won 8 Big Ten games with those guys on your roster. You want to be able to 9 is a little bit better, back-to-back bowl games a little bit better.
And I kind of see it as basketball too, right? Like you had Io, you had Kofi, and you didn't make a Sweet 16. Just missed opportunities for that time when you had generational players, right? I mean, that's what they are. Like I don't think it's hyperbole to say that
in
these
history
are
of Illinois
players.
Athletics, consensus All-Americans are certainly
absolutely right. This isn't the SEC. This isn't some of the other programs. This isn't Ohio State, Michigan. You know, these are generational talents to come through Illinois and to only play. What would that be? One bowl game? Like, man, like that's not good enough for Illinois. A missed opportunity that would be. All right. Any other concerns offensively for Illinois going against this Northwestern defense before we jump to that defensive side of the ball?
No, I think Paddock's got to make his progressions a little bit better. I think he's gonna have more opportunities. Get number 1 the ball. Yeah. I think the offensive line, like that is my biggest thing. Impose your will. They have played pretty good football the last 5 games. If they can continue to do that, my bigger concern is on the defensive side of the ball, Brett.
All right, let's get to it. The secondary is where it's at. Just circle
the secondary.
It's like not good. I mean, and I've taken it back like to the beginning of the season a lot of times because I find it fascinating for what we thought. Like we know this team as well as anybody on the outside, not in the Smith Center building, right? Covering them day to day, getting to know all the stories. And like, certainly I had concerns about the secondary. Jeremy. I just did not think it would be quite this bad. Like they're playing who we would have thought, and you know better than I on the depth chart, but like fifth string guy. Was Caleb Patterson a fifth string guy, defensive back? Well,
my issue, I mean, you would thought Caleb Patterson, a highly ranked JUCO, would make an impact, but he's only played 1 defensive snap, and he had a holding call last week at Iowa. My biggest issue is they have regressed. They've gotten worse as the season's gone along against Big Ten West passing offenses. So that's my biggest concern because Northwestern, which has had putrid passing attacks the last few years when Illinois has just run them 88-17 the last 2 years, they have a capable passing attack now. Ben Bryant's a capable Big Ten quarterback, and their wide receiver core is pretty good. A.J. Henning, a Michigan transfer. Bryce Kurtz, a really good senior for them. Cam Johnson, a transfer who's played really well for them. And then a couple running backs. Joseph Hyman's a drop-off threat. I'm worried about screen passes of them taking the defensive line out of it and trying to take advantage of that back 7. But they're starting to make just coverage busts that we didn't see early in the season. They have struggled to make plays on the ball all year. They're one of the worst, and they're the worst team in the Big Ten in interceptions, which last year they were the best.
Think about that from last
best
year,
in
man.
the NCAA. Of course, you lost a lot of talent, but Miles Scott is playing his worst football right now. Taz Nicholson continues to make penalties. Xavier Scott struggled a bit the last couple weeks, and I think he's a really, really good player. But you're seeing these freshmen come in, and this is why you don't want to have to play freshmen. Zach Tobey's going to make mistakes. He shows flashes, but he makes mistakes. Matt Krasedic showed some flashes, but he's going to make mistakes as well. So Clayton Bush has been probably their best defensive back the last couple of weeks. He made a critical run fit mistake late in that game that led to the touchdown for Caleb Johnson. So you're just not getting any consistency up there, which is why the front has to be good. You got to put those guys in better positions to succeed, to where they're not having to cover for a long time. But they're going to be in one-on-one battles, and Northwestern is capable of winning those. So that's by far my biggest concern, because right now Illinois, their secondary is playing like the worst secondary in the Big Ten.
And we've had the discussion all year. Do they play zone? Do they play man? Look, what personnel are they playing? That's my biggest question now, because it really, whoever they've thrown out there has not been even like satisfactory, mediocre. I mean, if I'm Northwestern today with Ben Bryant, I'm chalking up, hey, how can we attack this Illinois secondary early and often? Can I
get the ball out quick? I think that's what they're going to do. Get the ball out quick. And if they're in, I think Illinois has to run more man to man, because they are terrible in zone. Like I think it's a lot of young guys just do not really stick to their responsibilities in zone.
It reminds me of Lovie Smith, like where we just saw so many things in Lovie Smith where it's like, and even Sidney Brown, right? Even running Lovie Smith, like where the heck is Sidney Brown at? He's not even close.
But then when you're in man, you got to make tackles. Sure. You got to be able to be aware of screens, because if you're in man to man, your back's to the ball. Yep. You got to have your ears open to hear for those screens. So that's by far what I'm most concerned about. I think Illinois is going to win this game in the trenches. Can they guard on the back end? Can they defend on the back end? Can they get the running game going? Can John Paddock have a good game? But I do think they're going to have opportunities up front. But Northwestern is going to try and scheme against that.
Yeah, and I think that's where Northwestern, as a lot of teams have, get these quick hitters, eliminate Johnny Newton and Keith Randolph, or even the outside backers who have played better as of late. We'll get to that coming up. But, like, you know, take those guys out of it as much as you can with three-step dropbacks, with quick passes, screen passes, even all those, trying to eliminate those guys.
That's why you got to be good against the run. You got to stop the run, so you force them into these third and long, so you can let Johnny Newton, Seth Coleman. Gabe Akis has played really well well, too, the last couple weeks. So you got to put those guys in position, so they got to stop the run and set themselves up for some third and longs. Yeah, and then can they get pressure? Can they dial up some pressure? If you're in man, I think you feel a little bit better about sending a guy on the outside, or, you know, a defensive back on a blitz, or a stunt from, you know, your linebacker or whatever else, and your defensive lineman in there. But can they get enough coverage in man to allow that guy to even get home? I mean, it's a question I have, and I think it's going to go a long way to determining this game. Well, the other thing Northwestern doesn't do, they don't turn the ball over. They are one of the best in the country at not turning the ball over. Number 4 in the country in fewest takeaways or turnovers. Illinois is one of the worst at takeaways this year. So if you could get a game-changing play on defense, feels like the last time we've seen it outside of sacks was the Miles Scott pick 6 against Toledo, which that win has held up pretty well, because Toledo hasn't lost a game since then. They're going to the MAC championship game at 11-1. But can those guys make one play? Can the Gabe Akis was so close on that strip sack that just took a bad bounce. Iowa recovers it. That was close to a game-changing play. We got to see that from the defense today. And we talk about those outside backers. We finally started to see some positive plays from them, some pressure, some sacks, where early on this season, I mean, they weren't hardly getting home at all. Like, I do give them credit for adjusting, for getting more pressure, but they've got to see that again today. I think part of that was they were kept getting down by so much. The teams didn't have to pass that much. They could just run the football. Illinois struggled to stop the run. But, yes, I think the defensive front has been great the last 5 games. I think Seth Coleman has really built an all Big Ten kind of candidacy right now. I think Gabe Akis probably put together his 2 best games in a Illini uniform. He's up to 4 sacks, which he had last year, but he's doing it against Big Ten competition. Last year, he didn't get them against Big Ten competition. So those guys are playing really well. Denzel Daxon at nose tackle has played really well. You're hoping Keith Randolph continues to get more healthy as he gets a little bit more time off during these weeks. I have faith in those guys. Yeah. Dylan Rosiak's playing really well right now. But Kenenda Odaluga is out. James Krutz is going to have to play more. It's just, can you trust your back 5? And that's what we got to figure out today. And there's still that outlier of Indiana where they were terrible. There's still that outlier of Purdue where they were not good. There's these moments where we've seen this team play pretty good. I thought overall last week the defense gave them a chance to win. Yes. Now, certainly it's against Iowa's offense. I get it. Like there's things you have to take into context for all of these things. But like, overall, we've seen them play pretty good at times. Yeah. We've also seen them play very awful at times. So, like, there's got to be some kind of middle ground in there. And against a Northwestern team that is capable, but I wouldn't say great. No, the last couple weeks, I mean, Northwestern, to their credit, they've won these games. The last couple weeks, they played Wisconsin without Braylon Allen. That's a big difference for Wisconsin. And that was a team that was reeling a little bit, but Northwestern won. Last week, Purdue played about as bad of a football game as I've seen from a Big Ten team this year, but credit to Northwestern. They played, they took advantage of it, and they went and won the game. So that's the biggest thing for me, Brett, is can you count on this team not to beat itself? Northwestern, you can count on them not to beat themselves. Maybe they get beat by a more talented team in Illinois, but they're probably not going to beat themselves. Illinois, whether it was Purdue, Nebraska, late against Wisconsin, late against Iowa, looked like it beat itself more than anything.
Yeah.
They can't have those mistakes. They can't be penalized a bunch today. They can't commit these huge turnovers. They got to play a clean football game.
Yeah, and penalties continue, man. Like it's what this team is, right? Like we asked that early on in the year to ourselves. We asked that to Bret. Like, hey, how do you quit these penalties?
It's mostly in the secondary.
At some point, it just is who you are. They are a heavily penalized team, and it's cost them. It's cost them games this season where they've had some moments they probably should have won a game. And penalties, like how many times have we had 100+ yard penalties on Illinois this season?
They're the most penalized team in the Big Ten. Northwestern's one of the bottom 4, I believe. So you can't give them a bunch of opportunities.
In Bret Bielema's style of football, that just doesn't play well. Like you can't do that. They're not explosive enough on offense, and they don't make enough plays this year defensively. Maybe you could have got away with it a little bit more last year with the playmakers you had, but like in close football games, penalties can be the difference, and they by and large have not done that. If David Braun has not already wrapped up Big Ten Coach of the Year, I think he can do it today with a 7th win of the season. Yeah, I think he's probably already there.
I'm trying to get the Ohio State update because I feel like if Ohio State wins today, I still think Ryan Day has a case. It's 17-17 right now.
Okay.
So if they won that game, I mean, Harbaugh's not winning it. We know that.
Correct, yes.
Kirk Ferentz should be in the running, but I do think David Braun is by far the front runner.
I would also like to just, and this, I don't know this is just me thinking out loud here. How many times does a Michigan State or a Michigan or Ohio State actually win Coach of the Year?
I feel like more often.
They probably
Harbaugh
should, but
won last year, I believe.
I feel like it's just kind of like this underdog story. Like we root for the storyline. Like, hey,
Coach
David
of the Year is
Braun.
always the most overachieving team from preseason expectations. Northwestern certainly is that.
Yeah, no doubt. So we'll see how that plays out. And look, credit to Northwestern. Like I didn't predict them to win this many games, and nobody did, right? Like maybe even people inside that building, right? Where I know you had Matt Fortuna on the podcast this week. A little plug for you there, Jeremy. But like, I thought it was interesting that he said, like, even inside the building, when the guys raised their hand, were like, they all came to play for Pat Fitzgerald. Like they
didn't know who David Braun was. I mean, this is the first year he was in the program. First year as an FBS coach. So for him to get those guys to believe, maybe to buy into like nobody believes in us, and
they absolutely.
Pat Fitzgerald was fired, for reasons he shouldn't have been fired for. They rallied, man, and that takes leadership. I got questions about David Braun long term at a really tough job, the toughest job
to recruit
in the Big Ten, which is what made what Pat Fitzgerald did there.
Yeah, no doubt.
So amazing. That's going to be a really tough job moving forward. So I got questions about him long term, but this season, unbelievable job by him to get all those guys to believe and then to execute and call winning game plans.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And I think Northwestern will get up for this game too.
Sure.
All these players, by and large, have been there. They understand last year where they just got thumped.
Got embarrassed 2 years in a row, right?
Yeah.
And to top this season off with the Landon Lincoln Trophy in Champaign to win it, that'd be a heck of a year.
All right. How are we feeling about this one?
No idea, Brett. I think it's going to be a complete toss-up. It's probably going to be close in the fourth quarter. Going to come down to late execution. Sometimes Illinois does well with that. Sometimes they do not. I have no idea.
Yeah, and I want to give credit, too. I feel like last week, especially the fan base got in. I'm not calling out the fan base here, but, like, this team has closed out games. I think in Toledo, was it 4th and 11? 4th and 13?
Especially their offense. Their offense has gone and made some plays. The defense has really struggled in the fourth quarter. Even a win against Indiana, they really struggled. Toledo, late in that game, they really struggled. So those end of fourth quarters, the defense has really let up. But the offense has gone and won a bunch of games. They're 4-2 in one-score games so far this year. So they are very capable of winning those. But when you give it that much chance, it's a coin flip at that point. One missed run fit can change the game like it did against Iowa.
Memorial Stadium.
Right. And the other thing too is like, okay, you give up 18 fourth quarter points against Wisconsin, right? They've had moments there. They have won their fair share of those moments too. So it's not like, hey, the Iowa, what happened in the fourth quarter is not like an indicative of this team, right? I think they have shown they can win those games. But I do think this is going to be close at the end. And like that's kind of gone into my thinking of the score prediction too here of like, well, Vegas says it's 5.5.
6.5 now.
Is it 6.5?
Yeah.
Like To me, that seems like a lot. In a rivalry game, it seems like a lot, Jeremy.
I think Illinois is the better roster.
I agree.
Can they be the better team for 60 minutes? I have no idea. We've tried to predict this team all year. It's really difficult to project. But I think it's going to be a close game. I do think Illinois should win the trenches, and usually that's what I side with.
Yeah.
But they can't have the penalties. They can't have the turnovers because Northwestern does not do those things. So I picked Illinois. I think they're the better football team overall, but Northwestern gets out of its own way. Illinois sometimes doesn't. I went Illinois 24, Northwestern 21.
Okay, I'm in that same realm. I was thinking 27. I was trying to figure out the other score. I think Illinois will put up some points today. I feel fairly confident in the offense bouncing back from Iowa.
Illinois had a good last 5 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, for all the
I know they only scored 13 at Iowa, but
that's 13 more than Rutgers scored. That's 13 more than a lot of teams have scored. For them to get on the board, get in the end zone against Iowa, I felt pretty good about what Illinois was able to do there. And credit Barry Lunny for the bounce back. 5 weeks through this season, man, there was a lot of heat on Barry Lunny, and deservedly
from his own
so.
Coach.
Correct.
Games, right?
Yes, and deservedly so. And they have bounced back. I feel like this offense has taken huge steps to be one of the best scoring offenses in the Big Ten as a whole, but certainly like Big Ten West, no doubt about that. So I'm at 27. I'm going to pick Illinois too. We'll see. I would hate to go back and look at my prediction record. We all can't be Derek Piper on this.
We like to do confidence meters.
Yeah.
My pick this week, it's like a 2 out of 10.
Oh, jeez.
I have no confidence in either of these teams.
I need that
Big Ten West.
Piper magic. I need 10-1.
He's 10-1. Yeah. He picked Illinois.
That's not against the spread. All right, well, if Piper picks Illinois, that makes me feel a little bit better about it. Not against the spread, just straight up, but still, like we'll take that. I'm going to pick Illinois 27, and I'm going to say 24.
Okay.
So
field goal game.
I think it's going to be close. Illinois has not given me another reason to say that they're going to pull away and win by more than a field goal.
It's about time.
Sure.
They haven't done that all year.
Why you got to second guess me like that, Jeremy? Come on now. All right, we'll have the post-game press conference with Bret Beherns live on these same digital channels after the game. Of course, Jeremy will have a pod. We'll have a pod. All the coverage on Illini Inquirer. Still crossover season. You guys got basketball coverage last night. What else you guys got on the site leading up here to game time?
Got plenty of recruiting stuff coming up. Illinois has got a huge few weeks on the recruiting trail. 3 official visitors here today, including a 4-star 2024 prospect who will really be a cherry on top of their class so far. And then the transfer portal's heating up, Brett. And as you said, Illinois, especially in the trenches, is going to have to find some guys. And they're already locking in on a few that they want to get on campus here in a couple weeks.
In the trenches, also, how aggressive do you think they'll be in the secondary in the transfer portal?
I think they got a JUCO cornerback here today, Josh Pierre-Lewis, who was at NC State his first couple years of college. That would be an upgrade. I think he'd really help give them some experience. So, yes, they want some cornerback help. They've looked at linebackers. They got a JUCO edge, Daniel Brown, here today that can help replace Seth Coleman if they need to. They've already added a wide receiver. So, yeah, you're looking for upgrades and competition at basically every position.
December 4th
is when the transfer portal
opens, right?
I expect Illinois to be really involved in the JUCO market, FCS market, D2 even. There's some really good players coming up. To go in and try and beat some of these SEC schools for some of the top guys in the portal, it's probably not realistic for Illinois.
It's fascinating to me how Bret and his staff will approach that, because there's 2 different ways to do it. They've been very reliant on the JUCO model, but it is different, right? And I think it sets it up on how they go about trying to build this roster for next year. Very fascinating.
But I do think retention is the important word for Illinois.
Sure.
You want to keep your young, talented players that maybe didn't play a lot this year, keep them in the program. Try and keep a Coleman or an Isaiah Williams. I think keeping those guys is just as important as adding another transfer, because that would just add another hole you have to fill.
But that's not sexy, Jeremy. Fans want, the new name.
I get it, but I'd rather keep an Isaiah Williams than anybody else in the portal.
No doubt about that. He's been one of the best players in the Big Ten this season. All right, for Jeremy, I'm Bret. Thanks so much for watching the Your Illini Nation pregame show. Man, this is the last one, potentially. We'll see. Maybe we'll be in Vegas.
Yeah, maybe we'll catch up in Vegas or Phoenix.
All right. I'd be all right with that. Either one of those. Just no Detroit. Even if it is Detroit, we'll still be there along the way. Content is always good. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you after the game here on these same digital channels.